The marble floors of the penthouse gleamed like frozen water under Aria's cloth, each circular motion sending sharp pains through her lower back. It was nearly midnight, and the silence pressed against her ears with the weight of expensive things. Things she could never own, never touch beyond cleaning them. Her knees ached. Her fingers were raw. But she kept polishing, kept moving, because stillness meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering the number on her mother's latest hospital bill. $47,000. The figure lived behind her eyelids now, flashing every time she blinked. Aria paused, sitting back on her heels, and stared at her reflection distorted in the polished stone. 26 years old, and this was her life. Not the fashion studio she'd dreamed of in college, not the runway shows or the sketches that once filled her notebooks with colour and hope. Just this. Invisible hands keeping a fortress beautiful for a man who barely acknowledged her existence. She pressed her palm against the cool floor, steadied herself, and stood. Her uniform hung loose on her frame. She'd lost weight these past months. No time to eat properly when you work double shifts to pay for someone else's chance to keep breathing. The private elevator chimed. Aria's head snapped up. Mr. Ryang never came home this early. She quickly gathered her supplies, preparing to disappear into the service areas as she'd been trained to do. Staff were meant to be ghosts in this place, present but never seen. Jinwoo Ryang stepped into the penthouse, and the air seemed to shift around him. He moved with the fluid grace of something dangerous, his tailored black suit fitting him like a second skin. But it was his hands that caught Aria's attention as he passed under the recessed lighting. His cufflinks, platinum, always immaculate, had something dark on them. Blood. Her breath caught, but she kept her eyes down, her body still. Don't look. Don't see. Don't know. But Jinwoo stopped. She felt his gaze before she saw it, a physical thing that made her skin prickle. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at her to remain invisible, Aria lifted her eyes. He was studying her face with an intensity that made her want to step back, but she held her ground. His expression gave away nothing. No warmth, no coldness, just a calculating assessment that reminded her he was a man who read people the way others read books. Then, without a word, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. He placed it on the marble counter between them, his movements deliberate and precise. Extra payment. No explanation. No acknowledgement of what she'd just seen on his cufflinks. He walked past her toward his study, his footsteps silent on the floors she'd just polished, and disappeared behind the heavy oak door. Aria stood frozen, staring at the envelope. Why? She'd done nothing to earn extra, nothing to warrant his attention. She picked it up with trembling fingers, thick, heavy with bills inside. Enough to cover at least one more treatment for her mother. She should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt seen. And in this world, being seen felt dangerous. Aria moved to return to her work, but something made her pause. The penthouse felt wrong tonight. Mr. Ryang's head bodyguard, the one who usually stood by the elevator, was missing. She glanced up at the security cameras positioned in the corners of the ceiling. 2 of them had angles that didn't quite match their usual positions, blind spots where there shouldn't be any. A phone buzzed in the hallway near the guest rooms. Sharp, insistent. But Mr. Ryang's phone was in his study. She'd heard him answering a call moments ago. Aria's pulse quickened. She moved toward the sound, drawn by instinct by the same impulse that made her leave origami cranes in empty rooms, a need to notice what others overlooked. The phone sat on a side table, screen glowing with an incoming message. Doors unlocked. Clear path to study. 20 minutes. Her blood turned to ice. She didn't know it yet, but someone had already unlocked the doors. If you're already hooked, smash that like button and subscribe, because where this story goes next, you won't believe it. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and trust me, someone's about to get shot, and what happens after will leave you speechless. Earlier that day, Aria had sat in the sterile brightness of Mercy General Hospital, holding her mother's hand. The room smelled of disinfectant and dying flowers, a combination that had become as familiar to her as her own perfume once was. Her mother, Diane Monroe, had fallen asleep mid-sentence again, her breathing shallow and laboured even with the oxygen tube beneath her nose. Arya watched the rise and fall of her mother's chest, counting each breath like prayer beads. This was her deepest fear, not death itself, but the loneliness that would follow. Her father had died when she was 12. She had no siblings, no extended family who'd bothered to stay in touch once the money ran out. Her mother was her anchor, her reason, her last connection to the girl she used to be before the world taught her that dreams were luxuries. She pulled out her sketchbook, battered, hidden in her oversized purse, and began to draw. The design that emerged was an evening gown with origami-inspired folds, delicate and architectural, the kind of thing that would never exist outside these pages. Fashion design had been her language once, her way of saying things she couldn't put into words. Now it was just a ghost of a life she'd surrendered. "You still drawing?" Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. Arya quickly closed the book. "Just doodling, nothing important." "Liar." Diane managed a weak smile. "Baby, you don't have to do this. I'm old." "I'm tired. You shouldn't have to—" "Don't." Arya squeezed her hand. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." Because the truth was devastating. Arya didn't work just for survival anymore. She worked to give her mother peace before the end, to make sure the last thing Diane Monroe knew was that her daughter had fought for her with everything she had, even if it meant burying her own dreams in marble floors and invisible service. Miles across the city, in the same penthouse Arya would return to that night, Jinwoo Ryang sat alone in his study, staring at a photograph he kept locked in his desk drawer. His younger sister, Minji, frozen at 17, smiling at the camera with the kind of innocence that didn't survive in his world. She'd died 5 years ago. Overdose, the coroner said. But Jinwoo knew better. The Mafia life had killed her, the violence, the paranoia, the impossibility of being normal when your last name was Ryang. She'd tried to escape by drowning herself in drugs, and when that didn't work fast enough, she'd simply taken too many at once. He was supposed to protect her. That's what older brothers did. Instead, he'd been consolidating power, eliminating rivals, becoming exactly what his father groomed him to be: ruthless, efficient, untouchable. Jinwoo closed the drawer and locked it, the click of the mechanism final and absolute. He hated what he'd become. Every morning he woke up in this fortress of wealth and blood, and every morning he felt the bars of his cage pressing tighter. The family legacy wasn't an honor, it was a prison sentence. But men like him didn't get to leave. They ruled until someone stronger killed them, and the cycle continued. Still, late at night he allowed himself one forbidden thought. What if he could build something instead of destroy? What if he could be someone his sister wouldn't have been ashamed of? But those thoughts were dangerous. Weakness got you killed in his world. A knock at the door pulled him from his reflections. Marcus Lee entered, his second-in-command and one of the few people Jinwoo actually trusted. Marcus was ex-military, loyal to a fault, and shrewd enough to see 10 moves ahead in any conflict. "The council meeting went as expected," Marcus reported. "Elder Yoon made it clear he thinks you're too lenient, called you soft in front of the others." "Let him talk." Jinwoo's voice was ice. "His son's been embezzling for months. I have the proof." "That's what worries me. Cornered animals bite." Marcus hesitated. "Also the new maid, Arya Monroe. Elder Yoon's people have been asking about her." Jinwoo's expression didn't change, but something tightened in his chest. "Why?" "No idea. But I don't like it when they show interest in civilians." Neither did Jinwoo. He dismissed Marcus and turned to his security monitors, cycling through camera feeds until he found the one showing the main living area. There she was, Arya, on her knees, polishing floors at midnight because she needed the overtime. He'd learned her name from payroll, learned about her mother from the background check he ran on all staff, learned about her dreams from watching her sketch during her breaks, unaware of the cameras, and he'd noticed something else: the origami. Small paper cranes, flowers, and stars left in unexpected places throughout the penthouse. On windowsills, tucked behind books, folded from discarded paper and placed like tiny offerings of beauty in his cold, violent world. His staff probably thought they were trash. But Jinwoo had collected every single one, kept them in a box in his closet like treasures. She made beauty where there was none. She tried to bring light into darkness, and she had no idea she was doing it for a man who'd forgotten what beauty looked like. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, had warned Arya once in the break room, "Don't look the boss in the eye too long. Some men don't like being seen." But the truth was more complicated. Jinwoo didn't mind being seen by Arya. What unsettled him was that she saw him, really saw him, in a way no one else did. She looked at him like he was human, not a monster. And he didn't know what to do with that. 3 weeks ago, he'd done something unprecedented. He'd asked her a personal question. "Your mother, is she improving?" Arya had frozen, shock written across her face that he even knew she had a mother. Her voice had been small, uncertain. "The doctors are trying." He'd nodded and walked away without waiting for more, but the moment had planted something between them. A seed of connection neither understood yet. Tonight he'd given her extra money. No explanation, no eye contact. Just an envelope on the counter and a quick retreat to his study. Because he didn't know how else to help without revealing that he'd been watching, caring, noticing every exhausted line in her face. Jinwoo turned off the monitor and rubbed his eyes. He was a man who controlled territories and commanded armies. But one tired woman with origami in her pockets had somehow slipped through every defense he'd built. And that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. Marcus didn't knock. He burst through Jinwoo's study door with his weapon drawn, chest heaving. "We've been compromised. Someone leaked the security schedules, tonight's rotation, camera positions, everything." Jinwoo was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the gun in his desk drawer. "How long do we have?" "I don't." The lights died. Darkness swallowed the penthouse whole, thick and absolute for 3 suspended heartbeats. Then the emergency system kicked in, bathing everything in crimson light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Red shadows danced across the walls, turning the luxury penthouse into something from a nightmare. "Get down!" Marcus shouted. The front door exploded inward with a deafening crack. 3 figures moved through the smoke, professional, methodical, armed with military-grade weapons. These weren't street thugs or desperate rivals. These were trained killers, and they'd come prepared. Jinwoo moved on pure instinct, years of survival sharpening his reflexes into something almost supernatural. The first attacker came at him from the left. Jinwoo pivoted, redirecting the man's momentum and sending him crashing through the glass coffee table. The second rushed him simultaneously. Jinwoo caught the man's wrist as he swung a knife, twisted hard until bone cracked, and delivered a brutal strike to the throat that sent him gasping to the floor. 2 down in less than 10 seconds. But the third gunman had hung back, waiting. Smart. Patient. And now he had a clear line of sight. In the kitchen, Arya had been organising supplies when the lights cut out. The emergency lighting turned everything the colour of fresh blood, and her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard the explosion, felt it reverberate through the marble beneath her feet. Then came the sounds of fighting, crashes, grunts of pain, the sickening thud of bodies hitting surfaces. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to crawl into one of the service closets and pray they didn't find her. She was a maid, not a fighter. She had no business being anywhere near whatever violence was erupting in the penthouse. But then she heard Jinwoo's voice, sharp, urgent, with an edge she'd never heard before. "Marcus, you're 6. That crack of vulnerability, that flash of fear from a man who never showed fear, pulled at something deep in Arya's chest. Her feet moved before her mind could catch up, carrying her toward the living area, when everything rational told her to run the other way. She peered around the corner, and time fractured into slow motion. Jinwoo stood with his back to the third gunman, focused on Marcus, who was struggling with someone else. The attacker raised his weapon with cold precision, finger tightening on the trigger. In 3 seconds, maybe less, Jinwoo Ryang would be dead. Arya's eyes landed on the side table near her, on a small paper crane she'd folded that morning from a receipt, left there without thinking. It was still there. He'd kept it. Just like he'd kept all the others, though she'd never understood why. The realization hit her with stunning clarity. He saw her. In a world where she'd been invisible her entire life, this dangerous, complicated man had seen her, had noticed her small acts of beauty, had cared enough to keep them, and now he was about to die. Arya didn't think. Thinking would have paralyzed her. She just ran. Her legs pumped across the marble floor, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She saw the gunman's finger complete its pull on the trigger, saw the muzzle flash, felt time compress into a single crystalline moment of choice. She threw herself between them. The bullet hit her like a sledgehammer to the ribs, spinning her sideways. Pain exploded through her torso, white-hot and all-consuming. She felt herself falling, the world tilting, but before she could hit the ground, strong arms caught her. Jinwoo's face appeared above hers, eyes wide with something she'd never seen in them before, raw, unfiltered terror. The untouchable Mafia boss, the man who'd stared down death 1,000 times without flinching, looked completely undone. "No, no, no, no!" His voice fractured on the words. Through the haze of pain, Arya watched Jinwoo look up at the gunman. What happened next occurred in her peripheral vision, mercifully blurred. She heard a roar of pure fury, heard sounds she couldn't identify and didn't want to. When Jinwoo's face returned to her field of view seconds later, his hands were shaking. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Her blood soaked through his white shirt, blooming dark and wet, but he didn't seem to notice or care. He was saying something, his lips moving urgently, but the words reached her through water. "Stay with me." His voice shook. The first time she'd ever heard it shake. "You hear me? Stay. That's an order. Arya, please." He knew her name. When had he learned her name? Marcus appeared beside them, phone pressed to his ear, barking medical codes and addresses. Emergency. Gunshot wound. Female, mid-20s. Critical. Arya tried to speak, but her mouth filled with the copper taste of blood. Everything felt distant now, like she was floating just outside her own body. She should have been terrified, but all she could think about was that tiny paper crane on the table. The origami. Her voice came out barely a whisper, each word costing her. "You kept them?" Jinwoo's face crumpled, every carefully constructed wall crashing down at once. He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt wetness on his cheeks that she didn't think was blood. "Every single one," he breathed against her skin. "Every single one, Arya. Every single one." The confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. He'd been watching, caring, collecting her small acts of beauty like treasures. She hadn't been invisible to him at all. Arya felt her consciousness beginning to slip, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. But before it took her, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. She'd made a choice, and she didn't regret it. Jinwoo held her tighter as sirens wailed in the distance, his voice a desperate mantra. "Stay, stay, stay." For the first time in 20 years, someone had been willing to die for him. And it was the one person he'd never expected, never deserved. The invisible woman who'd somehow seen straight through to the man he'd forgotten he could be. Everything had changed. Everything. And neither of them would ever be the same again. The private hospital room smelled of antiseptic and expensive flowers. Jinwoo sat in the chair beside Arya's bed, a position he hadn't left in 48 hours. His suit jacket was discarded somewhere, his white shirt still stained with her blood. He'd refused to change it. Marcus had brought him clothes. Jinwoo hadn't even looked at them. Outside the door, his associates gathered in hushed clusters, confused and increasingly concerned. Jinwoo was ignoring phone calls from territory bosses, missing scheduled meetings with suppliers, letting Marcus handle a turf dispute that should have demanded his personal attention, all for a woman who, according to payroll records, was just a maid. But Marcus stood guard at the door and said nothing, because he'd seen what happened in the penthouse. He'd watched Jinwoo cradle Arya like she was made of spun glass, had heard the raw devastation in his boss's voice. Marcus had worked for Jinwoo for 7 years, and he'd never seen him show that kind of emotion. Not when his father died, not when rivals tried to kill him. Never. Something deeper was happening here. Marcus was beginning to understand that Arya Monroe had become more than just another person in Jinwoo Ryang's life. She'd become the person. Inside the room, Arya drifted through fever dreams painted in shades of red. She relived the shooting over and over, the cold weight of the gun in her peripheral vision, the decision that bypassed thought entirely, the impact that felt like being hit by a car. But each time the memory played, she arrived at the same conclusion. Given the choice again, she'd do it again. Something about that moment had felt inevitable, like every invisible hour she'd spent in that penthouse had been leading to it. On the third day, her eyes finally opened. The first thing she saw was Jinwoo, slumped in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand. Even in exhausted sleep, his thumb traced small circles against her palm, a gesture so tender it seemed impossible from a man like him. The morning light caught the dark circles under his eyes, the stubble on his jaw, the blood still visible on his collar. He'd stayed. He'd actually stayed. Arya tried to speak, but her throat was desert dry. The sound that emerged was barely more than a rasp, but Jinwoo's eyes snapped open instantly. He sat forward, fully alert despite his exhaustion, and she felt his hand tighten around hers before he seemed to realize what he was doing and quickly let go. "Water?" he said, already reaching for the pitcher. His hands were steady as he held the cup to her lips, but she noticed the way he watched her swallow, like he was afraid she might disappear if he looked away. "How long?" Arya managed. 3 days. The bullet missed major organs, but you lost a lot of blood." His voice was carefully controlled now, the vulnerability from the penthouse locked away again. But his eyes told a different story. They looked haunted. Before Arya could respond, the door opened. An elderly man entered, moving with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. He wore an expensive suit and a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. 2 bodyguards flanked him. Jinwoo stood immediately, placing himself between the man and Arya's bed. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. "Elder Yoon," Jinwoo said, voice flat. "This is a private room." "Indeed." Elder Yoon's gaze slid past Jinwoo to Arya, assessing her like merchandise. "I came to see the woman who's caused such disruption." 3 days, Jinwoo. You've missed 3 days of business for a maid. The council is concerned about your priorities." "My priorities are none of the council's concern. Everything you do concerns us. She's a liability." Elder Yoon's tone turned sharp. "End this. Send her away with generous compensation and return to your duties, or we'll handle it for you." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Jinwoo took a step forward, and even weakened by days without sleep, he radiated lethal intent. "Let me make something abundantly clear, Elder. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally, not to the council, not to the family, to me. And I promise you—" His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, somehow more terrifying than a shout. "It will be the last thing they do." Elder Yoon's face hardened. This was open defiance, something Jinwoo had never shown before. The younger man had always been respectful, strategic, careful. This was something else entirely. "You're making a mistake," Elder Yoon said quietly. "One that will cost you everything. Then I'll pay the price." Elder Yoon left without another word, but the threat lingered like smoke. Marcus, who'd been listening from the doorway, exchanged a glance with Jinwoo. They both knew what this meant. The council would meet. Whispers would spread. Jinwoo had just declared war over a woman who, by every rule of their world, shouldn't matter. When they were alone again, Arya found her voice. "My mother. I've been gone for days. The payments. Your mother is in the private wing of this hospital." Jinwoo cut her off, sitting back down. "Top floor. Dr. Harrison is overseeing her care personally, all expenses covered." Arya stared at him. "Why? I'm nobody to you, I'm just—" "You took a bullet for me." Jinwoo's eyes met hers, and the raw emotion there stole her breath. "That makes you everything." The word hung between them. Everything. Not something. Not someone important. Everything. "I don't understand you," Arya whispered. I don't understand myself anymore either. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Jinwoo visited every day, bringing things that revealed how closely he'd been paying attention. Books about fashion design from prestigious publishers, sketchbooks with expensive paper, pencils in every weight and hardness. He never said much, just left them on her bedside table like offerings. Arya started sketching again, and one afternoon she showed him a design that had come to her in a morphine haze, an evening gown with folds inspired by origami cranes, delicate and architectural. Jinwoo studied it for a long time. "It's beautiful," he said finally. "Like you." The compliment was so unexpected, so unguarded, that Arya didn't know how to respond. Instead, she asked the question that had been building in her chest. "Why did you keep them? The origami?" Jinwoo was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "My sister used to make them, before she died. I haven't seen one in 5 years, and then suddenly they started appearing in my home, small pieces of beauty where everything else was." He trailed off. "You reminded me that beauty could still exist, even here, even in this life." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Arya reached out tentatively and took his hand. He looked down at their joined fingers like he'd never seen anything quite so miraculous. "Tell me about her," Arya said softly. "Your sister." And he did. Haltingly at first, then with increasing openness, Jinwoo told her about Minji. About how the Mafia life had destroyed her slowly, how he'd failed to protect her, how he'd watched her drown in a world she never chose. Arya listened without judgment, without platitudes, just holding his hand and letting him speak truths he'd never voiced aloud. When he finished, she said simply, "She'd be proud that you're trying to be better." "How do you know?" "Because I can see it. You're not the monster everyone thinks you are." But outside that hospital room, darkness was gathering. News had spread through the underworld. Jinwoo Ryang had a weakness. A black woman who'd taken a bullet for him. Rival gangs saw opportunity. Racist factions saw an insult to cultural purity. Elder Yoon's faction saw a way to remove a leader who'd become too unpredictable. Marcus came to Jinwoo privately on the 7th day. "They're planning something, multiple groups. The threats are explicit. They'll come for her to get to you." Jinwoo's expression went cold. "Let them try. You can't protect her forever, not while running an empire." "Then I'll burn the empire down." Marcus blinked. "What?" But Jinwoo didn't answer, just returned to Arya's room. She was sleeping, her face peaceful in a way that made his chest ache. He stood there watching her breathe, counting each rise and fall of her chest like prayer. He didn't realize he'd reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face until her eyes fluttered open, catching him in the act. Their gazes locked, and in the charged silence that followed, something shifted between them. Neither spoke, neither moved. But Arya didn't pull away, and Jinwoo didn't apologize. The unspoken truth settled over them like falling snow. Whatever this was, whatever was growing between a mafia boss and the woman who'd saved him, it was real. Dangerous. Impossible. And neither of them could stop it anymore. 2 weeks after the shooting, Arya was medically cleared for discharge. She stood in her hospital room, carefully buttoning the clean uniform Mrs. Chen had brought her, wincing as the movement pulled at her healing wound. The doctors had called her recovery miraculous. Arya called it stubborn necessity. She had work to return to, bills that wouldn't pay themselves, a life that had been on pause long enough. Jinwoo appeared in the doorway as she was reaching for her bag. "What are you doing?" "Going back to work." She kept her voice steady, professional. "I've been gone too long already. The penthouse must be—" "No." The single word hung in the air like a verdict. Arya turned to face him, confusion and frustration building in her chest. "Excuse me? You're not my maid anymore." The statement hit her harder than it should have. Of course, she'd been gone for weeks, taken a bullet, become a liability. He was letting her go. The extra money he'd given her had been severance, not kindness. She felt something crack inside her chest, but she kept her chin up. I understand. I'll collect my things and... That's not what I meant. Jinwoo stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He looked different today. Tired, yes, but also determined in a way that made her nervous. Arya, sit down, please. The please was so rare from him that she obeyed without thinking, sinking back onto the hospital bed. Jinwoo remained standing, his hands flexing at his sides like he was preparing for a fight. Then what am I? The question came out sharper than she intended, all her confusion and fear bleeding into her voice. If I'm not your maid, if I'm not working for you, then what exactly am I to you? You're the reason I'm leaving the Mafia. The room tilted. Arya was certain she'd misheard. What? Jinwoo moved to the window, staring out at the city sprawled below them. I've been planning my exit for months, maybe years if I'm honest, but I never had the courage to actually do it. The family legacy, the expectations, the weight of it all, it felt impossible to walk away from. And then you threw yourself in front of a bullet for me. He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. You showed me that some things are worth more than power. Worth more than territory or respect or fear. You risked everything for someone who'd barely spoken to you, who'd done nothing to earn that kind of loyalty. And it made me realize, if you could be that brave, what the hell was I afraid of? Jinwoo, you can't just... Arya stood, ignoring the protest from her healing ribs. People like us don't get happy endings. You'll get killed. They'll hunt you down and... Then I'll die free. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just in front of her. Because of you, Arya, I want to live differently. I want to build something instead of destroying. I want to wake up without blood on my hands. I want... His voice cracked slightly. I want to be someone worthy of the sacrifice you made. The weight of what her actions had set in motion crashed over her. She'd just been trying to save a life. She hadn't meant to become the catalyst for a man to abandon his entire world. Before she could respond, Marcus burst through the door, his face grim. We have a problem. Jinwoo's entire demeanour shifted instantly, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the cold strategist. What is it? I found the traitor, the one who unlocked the doors that night. Marcus handed over a tablet displaying security footage and documents. It wasn't just some paid-off guard. It was Elder Yoon's son, Dae-jung. He's been positioned as your ally for 3 years, feeding information the entire time. The attack was meant to start a war, frame you for starting it, and give Elder Yoon justification to seize control. Jinwoo's jaw tightened as he scrolled through the evidence. That's not all, is it? Marcus glanced at Arya, hesitation written across his face. No. We dug deeper into how Arya ended up in your household. Sir, it wasn't random. She was placed there deliberately. Arya felt ice flood her veins. What are you talking about? Your mother's illness. Marcus looked genuinely pained to continue. We found medical records that don't match her symptoms. Traces of slow-acting toxins in her blood work from 8 months ago. Someone poisoned her gradually, just enough to keep her sick, keep her needing expensive treatment, to keep you desperate and compliant. The room spun. Arya gripped the bed rail to keep from falling. No. No, that's not... Why would anyone... Because they needed leverage over me. Jinwoo's voice was deadly quiet. They knew I was getting tired of the life, knew I was looking for a way out. So they planted someone in my home. Someone vulnerable. Someone I might notice. You were meant to be a spy, collateral, a way to control me if I stepped out of line. He looked at Arya, and she saw fury and anguish warring in his expression. But you became something they didn't plan for. You became real to me. My mother is dying because of your world. Arya's voice rose, all her pain and rage finally breaking free. Because some old men playing power games decided I'd make good bait. She's innocent. She's never hurt anyone, and they poisoned her like she was nothing. She tried to push past him, to leave, to run from this nightmare, but Jinwoo caught her arm gently. Arya, wait. Let me go. She pulled against his grip, but not hard enough to break free. This is your fault. All of it. If I'd never met you, never worked in that house, my mother would be... And I will destroy everyone responsible. Jinwoo's voice cut through her anger like a blade. Every single person who hurt her, who hurt you, who thought they could use you as a pawn. I will burn them all down. But Arya... His grip loosened, became almost pleading. I can't do it without you. Something in his tone, the vulnerability, the desperate honesty, made her anger crack. Underneath it was grief so profound it threatened to drown her. Her mother had been poisoned, deliberately, slowly, while Arya worked herself to exhaustion trying to save her. The tears came suddenly, violent sobs that tore from her chest and made her wound scream in protest. She tried to hold them back, tried to stay strong, but she couldn't. She just couldn't anymore. Jinwoo pulled her into his arms, careful of her injury, and she let him. For the first time, she let herself be held by him, let herself break in front of someone else. His hand cradled the back of her head, his other arm wrapped protectively around her waist, and he just held her while she fell apart. I don't deserve you, he whispered against her hair. I know I don't. But I will spend the rest of my life protecting you. I will make this right. I swear to you, Arya, I will make this right. They stood like that for long minutes, Arya crying into his chest while Jinwoo held her like she was made of something precious. Marcus quietly left, giving them privacy. When Arya finally pulled back, her eyes were swollen but clearer. Leaving isn't enough, is it? They'll just come after us. No. Jinwoo's expression was steel. To truly be free, we have to dismantle the conspiracy that brought us together. Expose Elder Yoon. Destroy his network. Make sure they can never hurt anyone like this again. And we have to survive long enough to do it. Yes. Arya took a shaky breath. She should walk away, should take her mother and disappear, try to salvage what remained of their lives. But something had changed in her during these weeks. The invisible woman who'd scrubbed floors had taken a bullet and survived, had stared down death and refused to beg, had somehow become important enough that a mafia boss was willing to abandon his empire. She wasn't invisible anymore, and she was tired of running. Then we do it together, she said quietly. Jinwoo's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away the tears still wet on her cheek. The gesture was so tender it made her heart ache. I see you, Arya. I've always seen you. And in that moment, standing in a hospital room with the city stretched out below them and war gathering on the horizon, Arya finally understood. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about justice or revenge or escape. She'd fallen in love with him. And from the way he was looking at her, like she was the only real thing in his entire false world, he'd fallen in love with her too. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The attack came at dawn, 3 days after Arya's discharge. Elder Yoon didn't believe in subtle warfare. When Jinwoo refused to fall in line, the old man struck with brutal efficiency. 5 of Jinwoo's allied businesses were hit simultaneously. Warehouses burned, bank accounts were frozen through corrupted officials. 2 of his loyal captains were arrested on fabricated charges. It was a declaration: submit or be destroyed. Jinwoo stood in his penthouse war room, studying maps and reports, when Marcus delivered the worst news. They're not just coming for your operations, they're targeting everyone close to you, families, associates, anyone who might give you shelter. The implication was clear. Arya was no longer safe, no matter how many guards Jinwoo posted. He found her in the library, sketching while her mother dozed nearby in the wheelchair they'd brought from the hospital. Diane Monroe looked better. The toxins were being flushed from her system, colour returning to her cheeks, but she was still fragile, still vulnerable. Arya. Jinwoo's voice was carefully controlled. We need to talk. She looked up, immediately reading the tension in his posture. What's wrong? I'm sending you away, you and your mother. Marcus will take you to a safe house outside the city. Armed guards, secure location. You'll be... No. Arya stood, her sketch falling forgotten to the floor. Absolutely not. This isn't a negotiation. You're right, it's not. Her eyes flashed with the same fire he'd seen when she'd thrown herself in front of that bullet. I didn't take a bullet for you to face this alone. We're in this together, remember? Or was that just pretty words? Jinwoo's composure cracked. Arya, they will use you to hurt me. Don't you understand? Every moment you're near me, you're in danger. I can't... His voice broke. And I can't fight if I'm worried about losing you. The raw confession hung between them. Arya's anger softened, but her resolve didn't waver. Then trust me to be strong enough to handle it. I do trust you. That's not the point. Then what is? The point is that I love you. The words exploded from him, months of denial and restraint finally shattering. I love you, and the thought of them hurting you destroys me. So please, please just let me keep you safe. Arya's breath caught. He loved her. He'd actually said it. But before she could respond, Marcus appeared. Sir, we need to move, now. There was no more time for arguments. Within an hour, Arya found herself in an SUV with Marcus, her mother and Mrs. Chen, speeding toward a safe house in the countryside. She watched Jinwoo grow smaller in the rearview mirror, standing alone in front of his fortress, and felt her heart crack down the middle. The safe house was a modest farmhouse surrounded by fields, guarded by 4 of Jinwoo's most trusted men. It should have felt secure. Instead, Arya felt trapped, helpless again. But this time, she understood the stakes. She wasn't just a victim being protected. She was part of something bigger, something dangerous, and being sidelined felt like suffocation. Mrs. Chen sat with her the first night, watching Arya pace like a caged animal. My daughter was in love with a man from this world too, the older woman said quietly. She thought she could change him, save him. In the end, it got her killed. Arya stopped pacing. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just be smart. Mrs. Chen's eyes were sad but kind. Love doesn't conquer all, child. Sometimes it just makes you a target. Back in the city, Jinwoo became a man possessed. He began systematically dismantling his own organization, releasing evidence of corruption to authorities, burning financial records, destroying leverage. If he was going down, he'd take Elder Yoon's entire network with him. But Elder Yoon retaliated with vicious efficiency. Within days, Jinwoo was framed for 3 murders he didn't commit. His assets were seized. Former allies turned their backs, afraid of being caught in the crossfire. The empire he'd built was crumbling, exactly as he'd planned, but faster and more dangerously than he'd hoped. Then came the call that changed everything. Marcus's phone rang at 2 a.m. A doctor from the hospital, Diane Monroe, had taken a sudden turn for the worse. Possible relapse. They needed to bring her in immediately. Marcus woke Arya, and they rushed to the car. The guards followed, professional and alert, but none of them saw it coming. The ambulance at the hospital entrance, the medical team that seemed just slightly off, the way the doors locked behind them once they were inside. By the time Marcus realized it was a trap, Elder Yoon's men had already surrounded them. Marcus fought, managed to take down 3 attackers, but a bullet to the shoulder dropped him. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Arya being dragged away, fighting every step but ultimately overwhelmed. Arya woke in a cold room that smelled of concrete and fear. Her hands were bound, her wound throbbing, but her mind was clear. Elder Yoon sat across from her in a metal chair, looking like a disappointed grandfather. Ms. Monroe, you've caused quite the disruption in my organization. Good, Arya said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Elder Yoon's phone rang. He answered, then held it out to her. For you. Jinwoo's voice came through, desperate and raw. Arya, are you hurt? I'm okay. She tried to sound stronger than she felt. Don't do whatever he's asking. Don't... Elder Yoon took the phone back. Simple choice, Jinwoo. Your empire or her life. Surrender everything. Your operations, your evidence, your allies, and I'll let her go. Refuse, and I'll send her back to you in pieces. You have 1 hour. He hung up. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she refused to beg. Instead, she looked Elder Yoon straight in the eye. You think you're powerful? You're just afraid. Afraid that someone like me could make someone like him want to be better. That's why you're doing this. Not for power, but because you can't stand that he's trying to leave. Elder Yoon's expression darkened. You know nothing about our world. I know enough. I know you're a coward who poisons innocent women and hides behind tradition while destroying lives. Her voice grew stronger, fueled by months of being invisible, being underestimated. You're terrified because you know he's better than you, stronger, and I make him want to be even more than that. For a moment, she saw uncertainty flicker in the old man's eyes. She'd surprised him. She'd surprised herself. The invisible maid had found her voice, and it was sharp as a blade. Miles away in his empty penthouse, Jinwoo stood alone. His empire was burning. His enemies were closing in. The woman he loved was being held hostage, and he was supposed to choose. His phone sat on the table, Elder Yoon's ultimatum clear. In 50 minutes, he had to surrender everything. He picked up one of Arya's origami cranes from the collection he kept. This one was different. Larger, more complex. Curious, he carefully unfolded it, smoothing out the creases. Words appeared on the paper, written in Arya's handwriting. Even broken things can be made into something beautiful. Jinwoo stared at the message, and something clicked into place. She'd already given him the answer. Not surrender, not retreat. Transform the broken pieces into something new. He grabbed his phone and called Elder Yoon. I'm coming. Alone. Let her go. Bring everything. The evidence, the documents, signed transfers of power. You'll have it all. He hung up and allowed himself one small smile. Because Elder Yoon had made a critical mistake, he thought Jinwoo was coming to surrender. But the man walking into that warehouse tonight wasn't the same one who'd ruled through fear and violence. Arya had changed him, yes, but more than that, she'd shown him that sometimes you had to break everything down to build something better, and Jinwoo was very, very good at breaking things. The world believed this was Jinwoo Ryang's final night. They had no idea how right they were, just not in the way they expected. Jinwoo was halfway to the door, his mind already calculating entry points and probable casualties, when Marcus stumbled into the penthouse. Blood soaked through the makeshift bandage on his shoulder, his face pale but determined. Wait. Marcus's voice was strained but urgent. Before you go, Arya left something for you. She knew this might happen. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket with his good hand, pressing it into Jinwoo's palm. She's been documenting everything, every conversation she overheard, every threat, every suspicious meeting. Names, dates, recordings. She's been building a case for weeks. Jinwoo stared at the small device, something expanding in his chest. She was gathering evidence, while recovering from a gunshot wound. She told me she learned from watching you. Marcus managed a weak smile. Said if she was going to be part of your world, she needed to understand how it worked. She wasn't waiting to be saved, boss. She was preparing to fight. Jinwoo plugged the drive into his laptop, and file after file opened before him. Detailed notes in Arya's handwriting, audio recordings captured on her phone, photos of documents she'd found. She'd been cataloguing Elder Yoon's network, tracking money flows, identifying every corrupt official in his pocket. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Arya hadn't just been saved by him. She'd been fighting alongside him all along. She'd never seen herself as his victim or someone to be protected. She'd seen herself as his partner, his equal, preparing for the war she knew was coming. She's extraordinary, Jinwoo breathed. Yes, she is. So don't go in there planning to die for her. Go in there planning to win with her. The words shifted something fundamental in Jinwoo's approach. This wasn't a suicide mission. This was the final move in a game they'd been playing together, even when he hadn't realized it. They were stronger together, and Elder Yoon had no idea what was coming. Jinwoo made 3 calls, the first to his 2 most loyal men, both ex-military like Marcus, both willing to die for him. The second to his lawyer, with instructions to release everything if he didn't check in within 2 hours. The third call he didn't expect to make. Mrs. Chen answered on the first ring. I've been waiting for you to call. Mrs. Chen, I know what you need. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. You need eyes and ears in places you can't reach. You need people Elder Yoon doesn't see as threats. You need us. Us? Every maid, every driver, every cook in every mafia household in this city. We're invisible to men like Elder Yoon, but we see everything. We hear everything. And we're tired of being invisible. She paused. Arya showed us that we don't have to be. She was one of us, and she took a bullet for something she believed in. So now we fight for her. Within 30 minutes, Jinwoo had an underground network of 24 staff members across the city, all coordinating through Mrs. Chen. They would be his secret weapon, cutting power, jamming communications, creating chaos in ways Elder Yoon would never anticipate. In the cold room, Arya worked quietly at her restraints. Her captors had searched her for weapons, but missed the 3 sewing needles she kept sewn into the hem of her jacket, a habit from her design days, carrying tools everywhere. Her fashion skills, once just a dream, were now saving her life as she carefully manipulated the lock mechanism. But she didn't run. Instead, she noticed the guard's phone on the table, carelessly left during a shift change. She managed to plant a small listening device, one she'd lifted from Jinwoo's security team weeks ago, behind a loose electrical panel. Then she accessed the phone long enough to hear Elder Yoon's real conversation in the next room. Kill them both. Make it look like a rival gang hit. With Jinwoo and the girl dead, the council will have no choice but to unify under my leadership. Her blood ran cold, but her mind stayed sharp. She found the messaging app and typed quickly to Jinwoo's number, praying it would go through before the guard returned. I'm not waiting to be rescued. Meet me halfway. She deleted the message from the sent folder and returned the phone, her heart pounding. If he got it, he'd understand. They were partners. They'd face this together. When Jinwoo's phone buzzed with Arya's message, he smiled for the first time in days. She was right. They were a team, and it was time to stop playing defense. He dressed carefully, not in his usual expensive suits, but in tactical clothing. He armed himself not just with weapons, but with documents, flash drives, and evidence that would destroy Elder Yoon legally and within the underworld. He wasn't going as a mafia boss. He was going as a man fighting for his future. The march to Elder Yoon's compound was cinematic. Jinwoo walked down the centre of the street with Marcus and 2 allies flanking him, weapons concealed but ready. Behind them, Mrs. Chen's network moved like shadows, cutting power lines, jamming security frequencies, disabling cameras. The fortress Elder Yoon thought was impenetrable was already falling apart from the inside. Inside the compound, Arya had freed herself completely. She crouched behind a stack of crates, listening to the chaos beginning outside. The lights flickered. Shouts of confusion echoed through the hallways. She recognized the tactical precision of Jinwoo's work and felt fierce pride surge through her. She whispered to herself, a promise and a prayer. We're both getting out of here, together. Then she heard his voice, clear and commanding, echoing through the compound's PA system that Mrs. Chen's people had hacked. Elder Yoon, I'm here. Let's finish this. Arya moved toward the sound, toward him, 2 forces about to collide in the final confrontation that would determine everything. Hope, fierce and unbreakable, burned in her chest like a flame that refused to die. Jinwoo entered Elder Yoon's stronghold through the front door, bold, deliberate, unstoppable. Behind him, Marcus and the others created controlled chaos, drawing guards away, creating corridors of opportunity. The compound was in disarray, exactly as planned. He found Arya in the central warehouse, already half-freed and grappling with one of her captors. Her hands were bleeding from picking the locks, her face bruised, but her eyes blazed with determination. When she saw Jinwoo, their gazes locked across the room, and in that single moment, everything they'd been through, everything they'd become to each other, crystallized into perfect understanding. Pride and relief flooded Jinwoo's expression. She'd fought her way this far. Now they'd finish it together. Down! He shouted. Arya dropped instantly. Jinwoo took out her captor with precise efficiency, then crossed to her, pulling her to her feet. You okay? Better now. She managed a fierce smile. Let's end this. They moved through the compound together, covering each other with the instinctive coordination of partners who'd learned to trust completely. The remaining guards fell quickly, some to Jinwoo's tactical precision, others simply fled when they realized the compound was already compromised. They found Elder Yoon in his office, cornered and desperate, holding a gun with shaking hands. The man who'd seemed so untouchable weeks ago now looked small, pathetic, undone by his own arrogance. "You're throwing away your legacy for a maid." Elder Yoon's voice cracked with disbelief and rage. "You're weak. Your father would be ashamed." Jinwoo stepped forward, positioning himself between Elder Yoon and Arya, not to protect her but standing with her. "No. I was weak when I lived for your approval, when I let this world define me. She made me brave enough to want more, brave enough to choose who I want to be. You'll never be free of this. Never." Elder Yoon raised the gun toward Jinwoo. The shot rang out, but this time Arya didn't take the bullet. She lunged forward and caught Elder Yoon's wrist with both hands, forcing the gun upward. The bullet went wild, embedding in the ceiling. Pain screamed through her injured side, but she held on with desperate strength. "I won't just be protected," she gritted out, meeting Jinwoo's eyes. "I fight beside you." Together, they disarmed the old man, and he crumpled into his chair, defeated. Marcus burst through the door with federal agents and local police flooding in behind him. "Evidence is uploaded and broadcasting to every news outlet in the city. It's over." The agents began reading Elder Yoon his rights as they documented the scene. The flash drives contained everything: Elder Yoon's corruption, the poisoning of Arya's mother, decades of crimes laid bare. Within minutes, the Mafia council members who'd supported him were turning on each other, desperate to save themselves. But Elder Yoon had one final weapon. "You think you're so noble?" He spat at Jinwoo, his face twisted with malice. "Your father ordered hits on innocent families, business owners who wouldn't pay, witnesses, including her family." He pointed a shaking finger at Arya. "Her father, Robert Monroe, shot dead 12 years ago in what police called a robbery. But it was your father's order. Your family murdered hers." The room went silent. Arya's face drained of colour as pieces clicked into place. Her father's death, the robbery that never made sense, the case that went cold. Jinwoo looked stricken, the truth of his family's sins crashing down on him. Their entire connection, their love, was built on tragedy his bloodline had caused. Arya could hate him now, could walk away, let the sins of the fathers destroy what they'd built. Every justified reason to turn her back existed in that moment. Instead, she took a step toward Jinwoo and reached for his hand. "Your father's choices aren't yours," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "You've proven who you are. Every choice you've made, every risk you've taken, that's who you are, not him. How can you forgive—" Jinwoo's voice broke completely. "Because you're the man who kept my origami cranes. Because you saw me when no one else did. Because you chose to leave this world for a chance at something better." She squeezed his hand. "We can't change the past, but we can choose our future." The agents led Elder Yoon away. The evidence Jinwoo and Arya had gathered triggered the collapse of the corrupt Mafia council, with arrests spreading throughout the city. In exchange for his testimony and cooperation, Jinwoo was granted immunity, a chance to truly leave the life behind. Standing in the ruins of his former world, surrounded by the wreckage of an empire he'd deliberately destroyed, Jinwoo held Arya's hand like it was the only real thing left. "What now?" she asked. "Now we build something new. Together." They walked out of the compound into the sunrise, leaving behind the darkness of the Mafia world. Marcus followed a few steps behind, then called out, "Boss!" Jinwoo turned, then gently corrected him with a small smile. "Not anymore. Just Jinwoo." Marcus nodded with respect and understanding. The man who'd been Jinwoo Ryang, Mafia boss and heir to a criminal empire, was gone. The man walking away with Arya Monroe, hand in hand toward the light of dawn, was someone entirely new, someone who'd been saved by love and chosen to become worthy of it. 6 months later, the world looked entirely different. Arya stood in her small fashion studio, sunlight streaming through the tall windows as she adjusted a dress on the mannequin. The space wasn't large, just a converted loft in a quieter part of the city. But it was hers. Every sketch on the wall, every fabric sample, every careful stitch represented a dream she'd once buried that had finally come back to life. Her first collection, Invisible No More, had launched last month to surprising acclaim. Each piece was inspired by overlooked workers, the maids, the drivers, the staff who kept the world running while remaining unseen. The designs featured origami-inspired folds and architectural lines that transformed the ordinary into something extraordinary. Fashion bloggers called it a powerful statement on dignity and visibility. Aria called it healing. Her mother, Diane, was in remission now, living in a modest but comfortable home that Aria had chosen herself. Not too big, not too small, just right. They had dinner together every Sunday, and for the first time in years, her mother's laugh came easily. Jinwoo had transformed too. He now worked as a security consultant, using his intimate knowledge of organised crime to help legitimate businesses protect themselves. More importantly, he helped others escape the life he'd left behind, offering resources, safe houses, and second chances to people trapped in the underworld. He was building instead of destroying, and though the work was harder, the sleep came easier. They lived together in a quiet apartment with exposed brick and plants on every windowsill. No penthouse, no marble floors, no armed guards. Just home. This particular morning, Aria sat at their small kitchen table sketching new designs when Jinwoo appeared with 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head before sitting across from her. He wore a casual button-down shirt she'd designed for him, simple, elegant, with subtle origami crane embroidery on the cuff. "You're staring," she said without looking up, a smile playing at her lips. "Can't help it. You're beautiful when you're creating." She glanced up, catching the softness in his eyes that had taken months to fully emerge. The hard edges had smoothed, the constant vigilance had eased. He was learning to be gentle, to exist in moments without calculating threats. In the evenings, Aria taught him origami. His hands, once instruments of violence, now folded delicate paper into cranes and flowers with surprising patience. She loved watching the concentration on his face, the way he'd hold up each completed piece like a small victory. He taught her self-defense, not to make her a fighter, but to help her feel safe in her own skin. They'd spar gently in their living room, and he'd praise every blocked strike, every smart move. "You're a warrior," he'd tell her. "You always were. Now you just know it too." They'd both changed each other in ways neither had expected. She'd taught him that strength could be soft, that power didn't require fear. He'd taught her that she deserved to be seen, that her dreams mattered, that taking up space wasn't selfish. It was her right. Marcus visited occasionally, now running a legitimate security business with Jinwoo as a partner. Mrs. Chen worked for Aria part-time, helping run the studio, and managing the small team of seamstresses Aria had hired, women from situations similar to her own, given second chances and fair wages. The Mafia world had moved on. Elder Yoon was serving multiple life sentences. The council had fractured and rebuilt under new, more legitimate leadership. Jinwoo Ryang was yesterday's news, a cautionary tale told in whispers, and he couldn't be happier about it. One evening, they stood on their apartment balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Aria leaned into Jinwoo's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, and felt perfectly at peace. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Giving up all that power?" Jinwoo was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he kissed her forehead, lingering there. "I didn't give up power. I found something stronger. I found you." Aria turned in his arms, looking up at his face, the face she'd once thought untouchable, now open and vulnerable, and completely hers. "We found each other." "Yes," he agreed, cupping her face with gentle hands. "We did." And in a world that had tried to make them both invisible, a black woman scrubbing floors and a man trapped by his father's legacy, they had become each other's reason to be seen. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories. And I want to know, What would you sacrifice for someone you love? Drop your answer in the comments below. Let's talk about it.